We have a quorum of town meeting members, and I call to order the fall town meeting. We have, as I indicated in an email that I sent out an hour ago, we have to repeat the votes, certain votes that we took last night. And I'll read my email for the benefit of those who may not have received it. It seems that Zoom has been unable to retrieve our voting records from last night's session of town meeting. They have every expectation of being able to do so eventually, but cannot guarantee that this will happen. This leaves us in a difficult position. We must have a record of our recorded votes as a matter of law. If we have to take new votes on last night's issues, we can either do it tonight while the debate and issues from last night are fresh in everybody's mind, or we can do it after Thanksgiving, which will give Zoom time to find our records if they can be found. And there's an additional problem in that we are only allowed 25 Zoom votes per session, so per session of town meeting. So that if we retake a large number of votes this evening, it will greatly impact our business for the rest of the evening. With all that in mind, here's how we're going to proceed. We took 15 recorded votes last night. 8 of these were for matters that need not be revoted. And those 8 are the votes, 2 votes to defer consideration of Articles 13 and 18 to 20. Then we had 4 motions for the question to terminate debate that need not be retaken. And finally, we had a dissolution vote for special town meeting 2 and an adjournment vote for the main town meeting. And in addition to those, 3 votes were on routine matters that passed overwhelmingly. Article 3, rescission of a Driscoll bond authorization. Article 5, the stabilization fund, and Article 7 on affordable housing requirements. If we need to revote these 3, we'll do it on November 30, since memory loss between the debates and the votes will not be a material factor. That leaves 4 significant and substantive votes that we passed last night. The vote under the second special town meeting, Article 1, on the compromise resolution relating to food and housing needs. 2 votes under Article 8 for the Housing Advisory Board composition, first on the Neal amendment and then on the main motion as so amended. And finally, the 4th vote was the referral vote under Article 9, which deals with short-term rentals. We will revote those 4 motions at the beginning of tonight's session. There will be no debate, just the 4 votes. And if indeed we do receive the Zoom records, those records from last night will be the official records. But these votes tonight are intended, to the extent possible, to replicate the results that we obtained last night. So you're essentially on your honor to vote the same way tonight as you did last night on these 4 issues. So the first one is the resolution that was agreed to by the advisory committee and the petitioners under Article 1 of the second special town meeting. And that was moved by Ms. Brown and seconded by Mr. Sandman. On that motion, this is the resolution motion. We will now revote that motion. And I remind you, the voting period has started. I remind you that only town meeting members should vote. Voting period has concluded. We have a couple of people on the phones. Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you. What's the count?
191 yes, 3 no, 4 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 192 in favor, 3 opposed, and 4 abstentions. Whatever that is. Mr. Richmond, you have a question.
Yes, I guess I'm a little confused, Mr. Moderator. Clint Richmond, Precinct 6. We have video recordings of the votes. We have video evidence of the votes on screen. You announced the votes. We're not required to take a recorded vote for any of these.
We did take recorded votes, and we're retaking them, Mr. Richmond. On the, yes.
Mr. Lepson, Robert Lepson, wonders if you can repeat the results of last night.
Yes, of course. The results of that vote last night were 194 in favor, 25 opposed, and 10 abstentions. Tonight, 192 in favor, 3 opposed, and 4 abstentions. And I will repeat last night's vote as we go through each one of these. Article 8, the O'Neill Amendment was the first motion that we considered under Article 8, moved by Mr. O'Neill, seconded by Mr. Ananian. And we'll start the voting period whenever you're ready. Oh, sure. I can do that. The vote on the O'Neill Amendment last night was 153 in favor, 64 opposed, and 8 abstentions. Okay, you can start the voting period for this evening. Okay. Voting period has commenced. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you. Count.
157 yes, 52 no, 7 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 158 in favor, 52 opposed, and 7 abstentions. Now turn to the main motion under Article 8, which is exactly the same as the O'Neill Amendment, which amended the main motion. And the vote last night was 217 in favor, 7 opposed, and 4 abstentions. Whenever you're ready. Voting period has commenced. Voting period is over. Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
211 yes, 4 no, 3 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 212 in favor, 4 opposed, and 3 abstentions. The Article 9 vote to refer, which was moved by Mr. Ananian and seconded by Mr. Goldstein. Last night's vote was 165 in favor, 57 opposed, and 5 abstentions. Voting period has started.
We need to have you poll, there are 2 Bernard Greens, and we don't need to have you poll them, because we don't know who's who.
All right, Mr. Jones again.
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
And I'm going to poll Mr. Green because we aren't quite sure. So Bernard Green. And when you come on live, tell us who you are, please. We have two accounts under Bernard Green.
2 accounts or 2 votes?
All set?
Do you mean 2? Are there 2 Bernard Greens or are there 2 votes?
2 people listed as Bernard Green.
Well, here's one.
Well, I see you. He's the authentic one.
Yeah.
The other person listed under Bernard Green, speak up. Not your fault.
I hope you're not embarrassing me by the use of my name.
All right. Yeah, if you could just identify your the other person listed under Bernard Green, it'd be helpful. Do we know who it is? All right. Do I still have to poll Mr. Green every time? Okay. All right, fine. What's the count?
It's 167 yes, 48 no, 5 abstentions, 6
Well-
abstentions, apologies, 6 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 169 in favor, 48 opposed, and 6 abstentions. I now need to correct vote totals for night number 1, and you needn't copy these down. There are only a couple of votes difference from what I announced. And I'm only going to announce the change totals. The first article under STM 1 had to do with the measures of wood and bark. 210 in favor, 3 opposed, and 13 abstentions. Article 2, the police contract, 163 in favor, 52 opposed, and 10 abstentions. In the second special town meeting, Article 1, the budget adjustments, 205 in favor, 8 opposed, and 9 abstentions. Article 2, the high school funding, 210 in favor, 8 opposed, and 6 abstentions. Number 3, the Newbury acquisition, 213 in favor, 6 opposed, and 5 abstentions. Now, we would ordinarily, we'll start with Article 13, which you recall last night having deferred to this evening. And then that's followed by Article 12. And Article 12 is the CPA Community Preservation Act article. And one of the key presenters was Mr. Lescoyer. Mr. Lescoyer is in the hospital. We all wish him a speedy recovery. And his co-sponsors have requested that Article 12 be deferred to December 3, which is the Thursday after Thanksgiving, if we go that far, and we have every indication that that will be the case. So the motion is to, and we'll deal with that motion right now. Motion is to defer Article 12 to be dealt with on December 3. Yep. And you shouldn't display the totals during the voting period. They're displayed on my machine. Okay. Time has elapsed. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
May I have the count?
We have reader on the phone now. McNally.
Ms. McNally?
Yes, Sandy Gatsby, about time.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, what's the count?
208 yes, 1 no, 5 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 210 in favor, 1 opposed, and 5 abstentions. That concludes the ministerial part of the meeting. We now turn to Article 13. The motion under Article 13 is on page 13-11. I'm sorry, it's on supplement number 1, pages 1 to 3. Moved by Ms. Granoff, seconded by Mr. Bors, that the town authorize and change the wording at the beginning of the motion to read, instead of to see if the town will authorize, should read, voted that the town authorize and empower the select board, et cetera, file a petition to authorizing the town of Brookline to establish a means-tested senior citizen property tax exemption, et cetera, in the words of the motion, going over to page 3 of supplement number 1. Ms. Granoff, you have 6 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Susan Granoff, Chair of the Moderators Committee on Elderly Tax Relief and Precinct 7 Town Meeting member. This town meeting is on track to becoming an historic town meeting, the first one to identify and directly address the many kinds of housing insecurity experienced by Brookline's low-income residents. Warrant Article 13 is part of that effort to help economically vulnerable Brookline residents. It seeks to help a group of low-income senior homeowners who have been hit with wave upon wave of debt exclusions and overrides in the past decade, and who are struggling just to stay on their feet and not be forced out of their condo or home. These seniors are predominantly unmarried women living alone, aged 80 and older. Their median income is less than $35,000 a year. Nearly 90% of these seniors spend more than half of their household income on housing costs, a clear sign of serious economic distress. And all of them have mortgages on their homes that make them ineligible for deferring their taxes through the town's tax deferral program. Warrant Article 13 is the culmination of over 2 years of work by the Moderators Committee on Elderly Tax Relief, a committee that was created by a 3-to-1 vote of the 2018 annual town meeting. The committee was expressly charged with developing a new property tax exemption program for senior Brookline homeowners who need additional help from the town. The result is Warrant Article 13. Our proposal is modeled after Sudbury's highly successful means-tested program for senior homeowners that has been in place since 2014 and has been adopted by many other Massachusetts communities. Under it, no qualifying senior is required to pay property taxes greater than 10% of their total household income, so long as they pay at least 50% of their annual property tax bill. So even if they qualify for an exemption, no matter how low their income might be, they must pay at least half of their property taxes under this program. The program comes with numerous qualification restrictions regarding home ownership, income, home valuation, assets, length of residency, and age requirements, including being unable to qualify for Brookline's Senior Tax Deferral Program, so as to target those senior homeowners who most need the town's help. We estimate that this program is likely to help about 100 senior homeowners with exemption amounts ranging from about $1,500 to $4,900, with most in the $2,000 to $4,000 range. If the homeowner receives a circuit breaker income tax credit on their state income taxes, that amount gets subtracted from any exemption they might otherwise receive. The program is revenue neutral. It would be funded by a small tax surcharge of 1/4% on all residential property set annually by the Select Board, up to a maximum of 1%. A 1/4% tax surcharge would currently result in an annual increase of $11 a year for the median valued condo and $34 a year for the median valued home. This program has three key advantages if passed. It would be another way to encourage greater economic diversity in Brookline by making existing housing more affordable for current low-income senior homeowners living here. It would also make sound financial sense and be cost-effective for the town to help these seniors age in place by means of this program, because seniors typically make fewer demands on town services than do other residents. For every senior who can no longer afford to stay in their condo or home and sells it to a young family with children, it is likely to cost the town over $50,000 more each year than if the senior were still living there. Finally, these low-income senior homeowners are deserving of the town's help, especially now. Most purchased their condos or homes decades ago when it was cheaper to live in Brookline. Through all their years in Brookline, they've paid their taxes, provided volunteer services to our town, and in every possible way have made a huge long-term investment in Brookline. Now, at a time when the town requires multiple, almost annual overrides and debt exclusions to accommodate the unanticipated growth in Brookline's school-age population and its deteriorating school buildings, and when many older seniors are facing greater medical and care expenses as they age, we need to do more to help these low-income senior homeowners who are having difficulty paying their escalating property taxes. One of the many qualities that makes Brookline so special is that we as a community value diversity in all of its many forms, including age and economic diversity. And we pride ourselves on having been named an age-friendly community. So let's not turn our backs on these senior homeowners now when they most need our help. This program will make a huge difference in these seniors' lives, allowing them to age in place in the Brookline homes and neighborhoods they have grown to love. I urge you to support warrant Article 13.
Thank you. Ms. Heller? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nancy Heller for the Select Board. The majority vote was 3 for no action, 1 favorable action, and 1 abstention. Every member of the Select Board expressed support for the seniors who, for income limitations, face difficulty paying their property taxes. And they're very sympathetic to this type of program and want to see something enacted. However, our concern about this article is rooted in the fact that while these seniors who have income limitations do have equity in their homes, that could be used, that we could figure out some method to use that equity to cover their property taxes when they're no longer in their homes. So the proposal targets the seniors who want to stay in the homes they own, income is not sufficient to cover the property taxes, and whose homes have a conventional mortgage, which has a first lien on the property, making the standard way that the town would recruit the exemption that it grants difficult under state rules. The proposal would have the town grant such homeowners relief in the form of an exemption, but that is not paid back in any way, even though there is ample equity in the senior's home. Rather, the proposal seeks to have other homeowners bear a larger tax burden to cover these exemptions, and the Select Board members were especially concerned that this redistribution scheme would harm those who are in similar situations but are just above the income limits and therefore not qualified, but just as worthy as those who do qualify. So here is a hypothetical but plausible example of a senior whose income is not sufficient to cover taxes, but who has home equity. A 65-year-old senior has a home assessed at $900,000, modest by Brookline standards, with a property tax due of $8,000 per year. And this senior would stay in his or her home for 25 years until age 90 and continue to receive the exemption for that long. Ignoring inflation for the sake of its simplicity, that means that the town would have granted an exemption of $100,000 to this senior. At the 25-year mark, the senior transfers the home by sale or by death. The equity in the home is at least $500,000, again ignoring mortgage payments, inflation, and growth. Why should this senior not pay back to the town the value of the property tax exemptions, still leaving a hefty $400,000 for heirs or for the senior to use for a different living situation? Obviously, every situation is different, but home equity must be given a greater weight in this proposal and a method found to have seniors return the exemption amount awarded when the equity is realized. There are methods to tap into the equity of a home which already has a mortgage. A small home equity line of credit could be used to give a senior homeowner enough cash to pay in full property taxes. There might be interest costs, but enough could be taken out to cover those. The petitioners have rejected this solution, but there may be a way for the town to help negotiate a program with local banks on behalf of Brookline seniors, and that would overcome the obstacles feared by petitioners. Yes, seniors hesitate to take this step because they want to leave as much to their heirs as they can, and I understand that being a senior myself. But as seniors, our first obligation is to take care of ourselves, and the town's obligation is to have as fair a distribution of property tax as possible. Now, it may be feasible for the town and the senior who seeks the exemption to enter into a contract for repayment of the exemption, in essence an IOU, when the equity is realized. I don't believe this option has been explored. Another seemingly unexplored option is the town's right to place a lien on any real property per the 1986 Massachusetts Acts, Chapter 316, placing of liens, which is basically an enforcement mechanism for the payment of fees, charges, and taxes. We might be able to use this in concert with the contract as mentioned above. A fourth option is to convince the legislature to allow the town to assume a second lien position for exemptions granted, since there's usually plenty of equity in a home to cover the second lien. In that way, the mortgage holder gets paid first, and the town has access to the remainder of the home equity for the repayment. These options need much more exploration and examination before any determination of their viable use for the targeted seniors. And town council needs to weigh in on the substance, not just the form, which is what happened in this case. The lack of a method by which seniors we are focused on here returns the exempted property tax to the town through use of equity in the property. It's a fatal flaw in the proposal. And the select board majority urges you to vote no action with the hope that the moderators committee will return with a proposal that does address this substantial issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bors. BOHRS.
I'm unmuted. Good evening, Harry Bors speaking on behalf of the advisory committee. As you've heard, we currently have a tax deferment program for income eligible seniors who have no outstanding conventional mortgage on their homes. Income qualified seniors who still have an outstanding conventional mortgage on their homes, however, are not eligible for the deferment program because of various federal and state regulations, reasonable regulations, by the way. So what is being proposed here is for those seniors who are income qualified to be able to get an exemption or a partial exemption. It targets, as you've heard, long-term seniors who are income qualified with outstanding primary mortgages. The median income of this group is below $35,000, typically senior women living alone with more than half their fixed income going to housing costs. Now, tax exemptions are not an unfamiliar concept, though the amounts here are larger than our other exemptions. The exemptions would range, as you've heard, from $2,000 to $4,000. Homes could not be worth more than 10% of the average home value in Brookline, so it does not apply to multi-million-dollar homes. It seeks to limit the cost of real estate taxes to no more than 10% of an eligible homeowner's income, providing, however, they pay at least half of their taxes. Now, while this does not affect the town's revenue, it does create a tax burden shift among property owners, and therein lies the rub. The average tax increase, as we heard, would be about $34 per year on a single family home and $11 for a condo. Of course, that's at the 0.25 interest rate. And the select board can adjust that rate annually from between 0.25 to 1%, depending on how many people are enrolled in the program. Of course, determining the rate is an annual public exercise. Now, concern was also voiced that this might shift the burden from a group of homeowners to renters. And it is true. A landlord may choose to pass on the, say, $10, $15 additional annual tax on that unit to the renter or not. Rents are negotiated as much as tabulated, and a landlord may instead choose to increase the rent on the two-physician couple, knowing there are other tenants who are on a small fixed income. We simply don't know, and it would only be conjecture on our part. What we do know is there are people in our town who are feeling severe economic strain and are not eligible for the current deferment program. They are unlikely at their low income level to qualify for an additional loan against what equity may be in their property in order to pay the taxes. And reverse mortgages are an expensive, complicated, and somewhat unforgiving option. They simply want to live out their days in their homes. It's a program that is not going to help everybody. It's only going to help some, but that's because there is no singular program. For many of us, this will come down to a question of fairness. And we can't tell you if this is fair or even what fairness really is. That's a value judgment that we all will need to make individually and collectively in this evening. But the advisory committee believes that it can help some in need of financial relief without creating an onerous burden on the rest of us. And this is why the advisory committee is strongly recommending favorable action. Also, our motion requires that the Board of Assessors report back to town meeting on the progress of this program so that we can assess it and, if necessary, rethink it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Scoyac from the Grinch Board, the Select Board.
Thank you for that unique introduction. I want to point out quickly, before I start my prepared remarks, that the Moderators Committee was first asked to study this 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you didn't have businesses closing all over Brookline. 2 years ago, you did not have renters in fear of eviction because of unemployment and inability to pay rents. We're in a very different situation today, and the fairness question has to be taken extremely seriously in light of the desperate situation of many in Brookline. And here are my prepared remarks. On behalf of the Select Board, recommendation of no action on Article 13. Brookline is recognized as an age-friendly community in part because of our history of easing the burden of taxation on elderly homeowners. Article 13 would expand Brookline's current array of tax relief to include a program pioneered in Sudbury, effectively capping property tax bills at 10% of income. As devised by the Moderators Committee on Senior Tax Relief, the Brookline program would qualify an estimated 100 Brookline seniors as eligible for property tax reductions amounting to a total of some $490,000. And that's an average tax reduction per senior household of $4,900. The revenue for the program would come from a 0.25% increase in the tax levy. The increase in the tax levy would be raised to 1% if needed to cover costs in future years. Keep that in mind. 0.25% is what we're being told is the cost of the program, and yet the proposal contains the possibility of raising that to 1%, 4 times. A close examination makes clear that the Sudbury Tax Relief Program is a bad fit for Brookline, rife with inconsistencies and inequities. Problem number 1, Brookline homeowners already get an annual residential exemption on their tax bill. Currently, $292,060 deducted from the property's assessed value. But Sudbury adopted their program instead of a residential exemption. Combining the 2 tax breaks distorts the total benefit in Brookline and should be studied further before we take Sudbury as a model for tax relief in Brookline. Problem number 2, 95% of Sudbury households own their homes, and thus when the time comes, they could be eligible for the tax relief. But in Brookline, 49% of households are renters, none of whom would qualify for the tax break. The average income of rental households is less than that of homeowner households, and yet by applying the Sudbury program to Brookline, renters bear the cost of subsidizing better off homeowners. Problem number 3, Article 13 creates significant disparities with Brookline's generous array of other senior tax relief programs. Currently, there are seniors who are required to work off their tax relief through volunteer labor and other seniors who get tax relief only in return for liens put on their homes, with the tax debt plus interest eventually paid back either by the homeowner or the heirs. Only one select group of senior homeowners, those who benefit from Article 13, would get tax relief as a no strings attached exemption worth thousands of dollars annually. And to get back
Please
to that
conclude,
earlier,
Mr. Van Scoyac.
concluding, thank you. A final note, Article 13 would call for flexibility to go as high as 1% to pay the cost. Does this mean the program would eventually require annual funding of as much as 4 times the given estimate, 1.6 million versus the given estimate of 400,000? Thank you for paying attention. Please join the Select Board, which by a vote of 3 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention recommends no action on Article 13.
Mr. Lepson?
Mute. Start video. I'm getting here. I assume you can hear me at this point.
Yes.
And alrighty. Well, thank you. My name is Robert Lepson. I am a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I was a member of this moderators committee, and I also want to say that I stand with Deborah Brown, and that's a very important part of this conversation. Okay, so lots of objections here. I'm not going to repeat what Ms. Granoff or Mr. Boers have already reviewed, and I know that Mr. Van Scoyoc has also, and Ms. Heller have also indicated some issues and problems with this particular warrant article. I guess the first point that I want to make is that people are saying, okay, this article only deals with seniors and that there are others in town who also have needs and also have problems making ends meet with regards to their own property taxes or other housing. Our moderators committee was charged specifically with this, so this is what we had to work on. Yes, there are others who need help as well, but from what we can tell, the folks who are in the situation that would benefit from this particular program in particular are very low income single women in great need. That's very, very important. Another thing is that question about renters, and is it going to benefit renters or is it going to hurt renters who just can't find a way to get their act together financially? Well, for those who are concerned that this program will put an undue burden on renters, the math to me just doesn't make sense. The extra property tax costs that would be paid by the rest of us in town, including landlords, will only add a very, very modest increase to our tax bills, as was previously indicated, $34 for the median single family home assessment. My guess is that this sort of thing will not cause landlords to pass on the extra cost of only a few dollars. $2 a month, $3 a month, $5 a month, something like that. It's probably not going to happen as far as from landlords. Other questions about, can people afford, should they go out and get a home equity line of credit? Should they do a reverse mortgage? Should they pay back, what has been granted? Well, again, the home equity line of credit, very difficult to qualify for in low income situations. Reverse mortgages, extremely expensive and complicated to set up. And if you were going to pay things back to the town, which I have no objections to, but isn't that just the senior tax referral program as well, which people can't qualify for by law? So remember, this is a request to file a home rule petition with our friends on Beacon Hill. Tommy Vitolo, are you listening? And the committee felt that the legislature has a much higher likelihood to approve this for Brookline because there is already a model functioning in Sudbury and in other communities like this. And remember, and this is also important, is that there is a trial period of about 36 months. Absolutely, just a second. Trial period of about 36 months to see how this is working, and adjustments can be made in order to make this program better for all. So I urge everyone here to vote favorable action for warrant article 13 as amended by the advisory committee. Thank you very much.
Mr. Toffel?
Good evening. So I support diversity in Brookline. Sorry, Mike Toffel, Precinct 8, excuse me. I support diversity in Brookline, diversity across age, across income, across race, and other dimensions. But I remain skeptical about this particular proposal for two reasons. First, it's not clear it targets the most vulnerable population. And second, the proposal doesn't seem to have explored all the dimensions that I'd like to see it cover. Let me explain each of these briefly. I think anyone proposing a scheme that offers tax subsidies to some paid for by everyone else has the responsibility to convince town meeting that we're subsidizing the most worthy group. Is this the most vulnerable group who we should be subsidizing? Unfortunately, it's not addressed in the moderator committee's report, and they didn't view it as part of their charge. Indeed, When Ms. Granoff kindly responded to my question about this on TMMA, she said, and I quote, "This is not a game of who's the neediest, where all the town's neediest populations are pitted against one another and forced to compete for help from the town." In fact, it's exactly what it is. It's a zero-sum game. We're taking money from some and we're giving it to others. And no one's yet made the case to me that this is the most vulnerable population. Another response to this question came to me also by TMMA that said the time to raise fairness was when we voted for the committee and not now. Well, it seems to me now is exactly the time. And to me, it doesn't make sense that we would ask senior renters to subsidize senior homeowners, to make low-income young families subsidize senior homeowners. I just don't think that makes sense. Secondly, I don't think this program's fully baked. When you hear everyone talk about low income, income itself is a terribly incomplete way to assess financial vulnerability. That's why financial aid, whenever we think about college financial aid, they think about income and they think about assets. So it just doesn't seem right to me we would ask low-income renters to subsidize, say, a senior homeowner who has a $50,000 mortgage on $1 million property. We're told the select board will set guidelines for excessive assets that might prevent that, but that hasn't been done yet. And think that's a very important part that we should see as part of this package.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Other options that some have mentioned that have not, in my view, been sufficiently explored are a home equity line of credit where they draw from potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity to pay their fair share, or perhaps a new type of contract with the town that would allow them to pay back the money when the property is transferred. I don't think we should be thinking about this as just 100 households or $15 per household. This is about a philosophy about who gets tax subsidies and who pays. I support a progressive approach to economic vulnerability, and ignoring assets is just wrong. It's bad policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Stone, Rebecca Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Rebecca Stone, Precinct 3, and Chair of the Brookline Commission for Women, speaking on behalf of the Commission for Women. The Commission for Women reviews the warrant for articles that may have a significant gender equity and justice component or impact. We found that Article 13 meets that criteria, and we urge your support. The Moderator's Committee on Elderly Tax Relief was created by town meeting and charged with looking for ways to amend Brookline's tax policies to address the dilemma faced by elderly, longtime Brookline homeowners who wish to age in place with dignity, but who find it increasingly difficult to pay their rising property taxes on often very modest fixed incomes. The committee's work revealed a small but significant group of these seniors who are not now being helped by current town programs. 82% of those seniors are women, the vast majority living alone. These are some of the most invisible members of our senior population precisely because they are elderly and live alone in a house or condo. Because we don't see them is not an excuse to dismiss them as less deserving. The Commission for Women strongly endorses this effort to see and support these senior Brookline residents. Commissioners discussed the arguments made against this article by members of the Select Board and others. Many of us were especially concerned by the characterization that because those eligible are homeowners who either do not qualify for, somehow gaming the system. One Select Board member suggested that any senior tax break be subject to the rule that you either work it off or pay it back. That is not the spirit that has guided our other efforts to support longstanding members of the community who wish but struggle to afford to stay in their homes. And the BCW finds it particularly troubling that such a phrase was used to discredit a program that would overwhelmingly affect elderly women. Finally, the Commission recognizes that this program does not address every senior housing need and in particular offers no help to renters. But as Ms. Granoff and Mr. Lepson both explained, identifying the needs of senior homeowners was what the committee was charged to do. and they and Mr. Bors explained in detail why other options or benefits may not be working for these low-income seniors, most of whom have an annual income of less than $35,000. The Commission for Women joins the Advisory Committee, Brookline PACS, and the Brookline Community Aging Network, founded by the late and much missed Frank Caro, in strong support of this article and urges favorable action by town meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Vanderkay.
Hi, I'm Judith Vanderkay, town meeting member, Precinct 9, library trustee, and also a member of the PACS board. And PACS has recommended favorable action on this warrant article. I want to ask town meeting to continue the theme of compassion for the disadvantaged in our community that has been prominent in town meeting this time so far, by helping out this small group of vulnerable seniors who have been long-term Brookline residents, who own their homes, who can't participate in other programs because they have mortgages, but their taxes keep going up. They may, in fact, be curtailing other expenses in order to pay their tax obligation. They could be putting off home repairs. They could be turning the heat way down. They could be putting off dental and medical expenses that Medicare or Medicaid don't cover. I ask you to think about one of these hypothetical people. She's 80. She raised her family here. She raised her children to be good Brookline citizens. Maybe she volunteered in the schools or for nonprofits or for town bodies and commissions when she was younger. Now she wants to stay here in the town she knows and loves. And I ask you to please help make that possible. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here. I'm not eligible for this program, but I have a great deal of sympathy for my neighbors who may be, and I hope that you will vote favorable action on this warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy.
Hi, Mark Levy, town meeting member, Precinct 7. And I want to talk about the issue of fairness, because I think the view of fairness that we've seen from some of the opponents is not terribly compassionate. If we had the choice between helping everybody in need, we certainly would love to do that. I certainly love to do that. But that's not on the table. That's not something that we have the resources to do. And the CPA will allow us, not the CPA, whatever this program will do, is to allow us to help some people who are genuinely in need. I've gone through a period of home insecurity, and it was not fun. And I was at the time middle-aged. People who are older, especially the very older, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's really stressful to lose your home and the attachments that are there. And I think everybody who has looked into the problems of homelessness among the elderly agrees that the best solution, whenever possible, is for people to stay in place and age in place. There are health benefits, there are community benefits, there are benefits of being able to be part of a community that's already established, not have to search for new connections in the different area of the community.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I don't want to go for what I consider, perhaps foolishly, a Reagan-esque definition of fairness. When people are in need, and I have no doubt at all that these people are in need, and the part of their need is because of actions taken by the town on overrides and debt exclusions, that we have a responsibility to do what we can with the tools that are available and the resources that are available. I wish we could do more for more people. We can't. But I would not help out these people because there are other people we can't help. And there are no programs like this available from the state that address the needs of tenants who are not covered by other forms of housing subsidy.
Please conclude.
Thank you. So I urge people, in the name of fairness, in the name of compassion, to support this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Stone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Danny Stone, Precinct 10. I appreciate the hard work that has gone into this proposal, and I understand that the homeowners in question are ineligible for the town's existing senior tax deferral program. That is out of our hands. I also know that high property taxes are putting a financial strain on this group, and I believe in the fundamental right of everyone to age with dignity. That said, after hearing what others have said tonight, I'm still having trouble deciding on how to vote. This exemption does seem to subsidize a particular group of homeowners at the expense of others in town, including elderly renters, other renters such as myself, and other lower income homeowners in the town. Even a modest hike for some people can push them into precarious financial situations, especially in a pandemic. Prior to tonight, Ms. Granoff was kind enough to explain to me the drawbacks of reverse mortgages. And after looking into them, I didn't have any background on that. They certainly don't sound fun, I must admit. No one wants to take on new debt, especially late in life, but this exemption does create a new category for a select group of income poor, but asset wealthy individuals who we are in effect allowing to choose not to access funds by borrowing against their equity. This is why, admittedly, I'm of two minds on this article. On the one hand, the exemption feels like asset protection for the heirs of some at the expense of others in town, which perpetuates generational wealth gaps. On the other hand, I do want to exercise compassion, as many have said, for this vulnerable group that we've identified. They clearly need our help. And for these reasons that I've laid out, I still find myself unsure how to vote on this. Thank you. I yield my time.
Well, you'll have your chance shortly. Ms. Khan? I think you muted yourself, Janice.
Okay, thanks. So I was trying to quickly find the information I was looking for that I had.
Who are you?
Oh, Janice Khan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 15. So there are states in this country that for instance, exempt seniors from paying school property tax overrides. That's not what we're doing in Brookline. You know, seniors pay those overrides in this town. We ask for no special seniors, ask for no special privileges regarding that. I very much support the goals of this article, and I do support the advisory committee's suggestion that we evaluate it once it's in place. I think it's definitely worth exploring, worth being a community that does look at fairness for everyone to some extent. And, you know, I think we do ourselves better as a community to broadly help people in this community. And so I urge you to support the advisory committee's motion. Thank you.
Ms. Granoff, you're next, but I'm going to hear from a few people that we have not heard from before I get to you. And I promise you, you'll have an opportunity to reprise. Mr. Gasach?
Sorry about that. Had a little problem with the unmute control. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to Ms. Granoff and everyone who has worked so hard on this very important initiative. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I have not asked this question earlier in the process, because I should have, to respect all the hard work that you've done. This is an extremely noble goal, which I fully support along with you. My question is, if we're asking the state legislature to grant a home rule petition to allow us to waive a portion of property taxes for these individuals or these types of situations completely, is there any reason why we couldn't alternatively ask the legislature to give us the same permission, simply to defer the same amount of taxes indefinitely with no interest until a realization event on the value of the home occurred? In effect, no second mortgage, no reverse mortgage, no home equity line of credit needed. Simply, we're not going to collect this amount until next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, once the home is sold. And we could even put once the home is sold at a profit if we wanted to. Is there a provision of, was that considered by the committee? And I'd love to hear why that's not an option that makes as much or more sense. Thank you.
Ms. Granoff?
Yes, thank you for your question. The committee did indeed consider that issue, and we consulted with the state legislature's Joint Committee on Revenue. And we were told that having a home rule petition that would require the town to take other than a first lien position would be looked on with great disfavor by the state legislature. They're very concerned about the rest of the state, where in perhaps 2/3 of the state, property values fluctuate wildly, not like in Brookline, where it tends mostly to keep rising. But in other parts of the state, when you have property that can be decreasing in value, often for many years, the state legislature tends to feel it would be fiscally irresponsible to permit municipalities to take other than a first lien position on any tax deferral amounts. So that was one of the reasons that we did not further explore the possibility of a separate home rule petition asking the town to not be required to take a first lien position. It seems as though this would be a very long, hard battle, and it's always difficult to get anything through the state legislature. So we felt that that would be not worth the kind of effort that would be needed, particularly when there would be likely no success at the end of it.
Did that answer your question, sir? I gather it does. Ms. Vogt, VOGT.
Hi, my name is Marissa Vogt. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 4, and this is Victoria. I have a question. I have two questions. Just rough numbers for the population that would qualify for this program. by what percentage has the typical amount of property taxes that they pay increased over the past 10 years or so? And what fraction of their housing costs is actually represented by property taxes versus principal and interest on their mortgage and other things?
Can you respond to that, Ms. Granoff?
I can respond to the extent to say that we don't have that kind of specific data. We got our data from the data collected by the US Census Bureau, American Community Surveys, and they don't ask those specific questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fernandez.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Raul Fernandez, Select Board member, and also renter. I voted in favor of this, and I want to say why I plan to do so again tonight. There's a value here, and it's a value about elders. It's interesting. Every year we have candidates that show up at the senior center and talk about the need to do more for seniors in our community. And here's an example, an opportunity to do just that, as we've heard from Mr. Lebson, Stone, and so many others. This group did the work to get the universe of the possible number of people, total number of people that could apply and be eligible for this program down to 100. Frankly, it's likely that the ultimate number will be far less than that. Many of you know we have this senior tax deferral program. I believe currently, may be updated, but currently I believe the total whopping number of seniors that are able to utilize that program right now are 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the entire town of Brookline. This is an opportunity to expand support to a group that we know needs it. I do think there is a provision in there where it's going to be on us to figure out what constitutes excessive assets. Not thrilled with that part, that we've got to take on that work, but I think it's important work to do, as Mr. Toffel said. That's a big part of this, and I think if this comes to our desk, we'll take that work very seriously. But ultimately, this is about our values. Do we value supporting people who have lived in this community for many years and through no fault of their own are being priced out of homes, not multi-million-dollar homes as was described before, but homes that have risen in value to the extent that they cannot continue to afford on their own to cover the increases in property taxes, the much needed, by the way, increases in property taxes.
1 minute.
You got it. Can we pull together to help out that few number of people that really, really need it? I think we can. And I think it really does come down to that. Can this be improved? Likely. And I appreciate the provision that also asks us to revisit this, see what's working, see what's not, see if anyone's sneaking through. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but see if anyone's sneaking through and taking advantage of this program unfairly. I think we can do all those things and continue to improve upon this. But the first thing we have to do is pass this tonight so that we can start to do that work and help those who most need it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Yes, hello. My name is Susie Roberts, Precinct 2. I wanted to speak in favor of the advisory committee's recommendation. And I also want to thank the moderators committee for coming up with something that actually can be useful to people like my mom. I wanted to give some human dimension to what's been happening with people who are elderly, and to tell you that you can't just put a home equity line of credit on your house. It's not easy to get a reverse mortgage. We're in a situation now, and I'm desperately trying to figure out what to do, where in fact my mother has been living off equity in her house for years, since my father died 10 years ago. 10 years. The line of credit is running out. We are at the limit of the FHA requirement, and I will not be able to get another reverse mortgage. My mother gets $1,400 a month in Social Security. What is she supposed to do? Obviously, she can't get a home equity line of credit. Obviously, she can't get another reverse mortgage. She has already done this. And so to be able to save half of the property taxes on her house, that would be a big deal. That would be a very big deal. Her house can be a little bit warmer. That is true. Whoever mentioned that earlier, that is an issue. And so what I want to say is I am perfectly willing for my mother's equity to be used in this house, but you have to understand there really aren't that many vehicles for that to be done. And once you reach the limit, it is very hard to get any kind of whatever it might be called, a jumbo reverse mortgage. These things are not easy. And I, believe me, have done my homework. So to those of you who are on the fence about this, I think that the advisory committee's proposal is a good one where we can go with this for now to help people like my mother, and I'm sure she's not the only one in town. Again, I'm sure there probably aren't that many of them either. But then we can revisit and see whether or not there might be other ways for us to figure out how equity in people's homes can be used beyond what is already conventional. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion for the question. We've, I think, had a reasonable discussion of both sides of this issue, and I will allow the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been seconded. I have the following, excuse me, people signed up to speak who will be unable to speak if this motion is successful. Ms. Hillman, Mr. Van Scoyac, Mr. Rudolph, Mr. Yassin, and Mr. Selwyn. So this is a motion for the question, Article 13. And the voting period has commenced. Yes, if you wish to terminate debate. No, if you wish to hear more. Takes a 2/3 vote. Right, the voting period is over. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dewart? Click on your mute button. Oh, I'm sorry. Star 6. Star 6, and let us know whether you want to terminate debate.
Stewart, yes.
Thank you. Ms. McNally.
McNally, yes.
And the count?
155 yes, 56 no, 15 abstentions.
Motion carries by a 2/3 vote, 158 in favor, 56 opposed, and 15 abstentions. We proceed now to a vote on the motion for a for a application for the special to the general court for a home rule amendment on pages 1 to 3 of supplement number 1. This is main motion, Article 13. is terminated. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dewart? *6, Mr. Dewart.
Stewart, yes.
Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes.
Count.
179 yes, 35 no, 12 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 182 in favor, 35 opposed, and 12 abstentions.
Mr. Moderator, there's been several inquiries about whether that was a recorded vote.
Yes, it was. All votes are recorded votes unless I tell you otherwise. So Article 12 would normally be our next article, but that's been deferred to December 3. So we turn to Article 14. And the motion under Article 14 is on page 14-12 to 13. Moved by Ms. Silbaugh, seconded by Ms. Toomey, that the town amend the town general bylaws on tobacco control in a manner that you will hear from the speakers. Mr. Ishak.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Ishak, and I'm a resident of Brookline, and I work as a population health pharmacist at a nearby hospital. This article does one simple thing. It prohibits the sale of tobacco products in Brookline to anyone born in 2000 or later. That means that everyone who can buy now can continue to buy, and those selling lose no existing customers. It just says that Brookline will not make available to sellers a new crop of customers who turn 21 each year. We are all well aware of the dangers of tobacco. It is lethal and most users want to quit but cannot because of the addictive design. Brookline has long been at the forefront in confronting this reality with the state and sometimes US following. For example, in '95, we banned smoking indoors and the state followed in June 2004. In 2012, we banned tobacco sales at pharmacies. The state followed in 2018. In 2014, we raised the age to 21. The state followed in 2018, and then the US followed this year. 2019, we banned flavored tobacco, including menthol, and then June of this year, the state follows. It is my hope that tonight, Brookline will be the model for surrounding jurisdictions again. As petitioners, we are honored to have the support of Raul Fernandez, Nancy Heller, and the Honorable Tommy Vitolo for this proposal. PHAI at Northeastern was also involved in drafting this article for legality. This warrant article very slowly, year by year, raises the bar for the purchase of tobacco and thus helps to reduce new users and new addiction. According to the CDC, 80 to 90% of tobacco users start underage, and in fact, 99% have tried tobacco before the age of 26. Most immediately regret it, as evidenced by 73 or nearly 73% of smokers aged 25 to 44 want to quit. Brookline is a town just like anywhere else, and these numbers are probably reflective here too. The tobacco-free generation concept, as this warrant article proposes, allows the incremental phase out of tobacco over many years without impacting the rights of current users and while minimizing the impact to businesses. Racial equity has been raised as a point in opposition to this article, as many of Brookline's vendors are BIPOC. Equity is in fact a motivating force behind this article, and so I'd like to address that point right away. As I am the child of an immigrant who used Boston as his port of entry into the US and then eventually worked at a gas station. There are 3 equity points I'd like to highlight. 1, tobacco companies have long targeted low-income communities, communities of color, and the LGBTQ community, and they still do. This warrant article is proactive against tobacco's attempts to create new addicts, particularly against those of low socioeconomic status. Adults at or below the poverty level or those with less than a high school education are 3 times as likely as those with a college degree to be addicted to tobacco. This is not because these groups are different in willpower than other groups, not at all. It is because they are continuously and consistently exploited by the tobacco industry in directed campaigns. 2, this article aims to improve the neighborhood and built environment, which is known to be a prime social determinant of health. By helping to provide a healthy environment and reducing access to a toxic addicting substance, the most vulnerable residents of our town improve their long-term health while having the extra financial means to address their needs. The CDC's Healthy People 2030 proposes that we emphasize addressing social determinants of health to bring about, quote, social and physical environments that promote good health for all, unquote. The example set by this warrant article makes a huge step towards a goal which is less than 10 years away. 3, because smoking and tobacco is expensive, addictive, and very difficult to quit, we impose a regressive tax by allowing marketers to create new users each year. Someone born after 2000 who avoids this addiction would save $150 to $300 a month to spend on food, diapers and daycare, books and other necessities, or even better housing in a town that has seen continuous housing cost increase that prices out those of lower income levels. That person would also reduce the risk of secondhand smoke to children and other residents of the town, along with avoiding a lifetime of increased health costs. The exploitation of low-income BIPOC and LGBTQ communities by big tobacco is unconscionable. Finally, the neat design of this warrant article would impose very little on the DPH in enforcement. Since its onset is next year in 2021, DPH could request an increase in budget if they do foresee expenses, though I don't see that need. To summarize, this will not impact any of the 3,200 smokers in Brookline, nor our small businesses' current customer base. This warrant article aims to reduce regret from initiating smoking. This warrant article provides the town of Brookline with a chance to make substantive progress against tobacco, rather than using our privilege to leave a regressive tax on those of lower socioeconomic status, which subsidizes tobacco companies. It improves health equity and addresses health disparity in a novel incremental process, which is a primary reason we ask that you vote favorable action on warrant article 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bors. Bors, B-O-H-R-S.
Good evening, Harry Bors speaking on behalf of the Advisory Committee. So this article follows in a sequence of many tobacco-related articles: restaurant smoking bans, no sales in pharmacies, no smoking around BHS, limited tobacco permits, limits in flavored products, and of course, the prohibition of sales to those under 21. The article before us is an attempt to improve public health and reduce people's use of an unsafe and highly addictive product. Now, the original article did have several provisions, including a 3 violations, loss of permit, a sunsetting of permits when ownership transferred, and restrictions on the size of retail establishments. For a variety of reasons outlined in our report, these provisions have been removed, and what remains is a proposal to change the current age of 21 for purchasing tobacco products to a specific birth date, January 1st, 2000. Now, to our knowledge, no other city or town has done this. So rather than the current static approach of using a fixed age of 21, this is more kinetic in that it moves with an existing cohort of legal buyers while leaving those currently unable to legally purchase, unable to purchase here in Brookline in perpetuity, eventually reducing buyers in Brookline to 0. While it may be interesting though, it hardly addresses the issue of squelching convenience when an adult can simply walk the extra block to Alston or JP or Cleveland Circle in order to legally purchase tobacco products, which, by the way, would impact our own local Brookline merchants. More importantly, state law asserts preeminence under Section 22, and Town Council's office has advised that this birth date provision is likely in conflict. Though not everybody agrees on this interpretation, and it may be a distinction without a difference, we don't know, but it would likely require home rule legislation, and this article does not attempt that. While this approach is intriguing, the advisory committee felt it may not hold up legally, but more importantly, the committee believes it unreasonably and unproductively affects adults who choose to legally purchase a legal product, whether it's a product we approve of or not. And we do not attempt this with other legal products purchased by adults, such as marijuana or alcohol. And so committee members question where we draw the line. So for all of these reasons, the questions of effectiveness, fairness, and legality, the advisory committee, by a 6-20 vote, is recommending no action on Article 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heller.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nancy Heller speaking for myself, Select Board member. I was in the minority on this issue. But I support this proposal because smoking is so harmful to both individuals and to our society. We all know that smoking damages individuals who acquire many health problems as a result of this addiction, and it's poisonous to those who are around the smoker in the form of secondhand smoke. But the cost to our society is also huge. I'll deal with just the financial issues. I mean, the deaths are enormous as well. 9,300 adults every year. Children who are now under 18 and alive in Massachusetts will die from smoking prematurely at the rate of 103,000. But the costs as well are burdensome, and they're burdensome to all of us because we bear some of these costs. The annual health care costs in Massachusetts directly caused by smoking is over $4 billion. For the United States, it's $300 billion. Medicaid costs are $1.26 billion. These are billions I'm talking about. So the cost to our environment is also significant. Cigarettes impact and damage our environment. Cigarette butts are not just a nuisance, they're toxic waste. They contain chemicals that contaminate our waterways and ground soil and harm our wildlife. They contribute to the littering problem on our beaches and in our parks and other open spaces. Discarded lit cigarettes can cause fires, which can damage homes and land. So this issue is not just an individual choice issue. It's an issue of how we regulate public health in this country. And we are having an example of this right now in COVID. Some of us would prefer not to wear masks. Is that our choice? No, because we are protecting others by wearing those masks and socially distancing, not gathering as we would like. This town meeting has considered many smoking control measures over the past several years. And one of the major objections is that it will harm local businesses. It's been suggested to businesses that they seek an alternative business model that will compensate for the loss of revenue. But to date, that doesn't seem to have happened. Perhaps this article would be the catalyst that will make that happen. We should work with their businesses to make it happen, rather than allowing the businesses to continue to sell a poisonous product that harms us all, and a poisonous product to the young who haven't started yet, who haven't gotten addicted, and we'd like to keep it that way. Please vote favorable action on the petitioner's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton.
Or a majority select board. Although an intriguing concept, restricting tobacco sales to those born after a certain date is arbitrary and capricious, not only to the adults who find themselves born after the cutoff date, but also to the small business owners who rely on the sale of a legal product. Please vote no action on the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. Nancy.
Okay, this is Nancy Daly from Precinct 12, and I ask you to join me for a few minutes in thinking about the real costs of smoking and who bears that cost. According to the NIH, cigarette smoking causes about 1 in every 5 deaths in the US per year. It is the main preventable cause of death and illness in the United States. In my own life, I had 2 cousins and a close friend who each, after having several years of terrible health, died much earlier than they should have, which made it real to me. Unfortunately, we still have too many young people taking up smoking, and for them, the price they will have to pay seems very far off. But smoking also harms the family and friends of the smoker. Babies born of mothers who smoke are significantly more likely to be born prematurely and to have medical problems. Secondhand smoke can also lower good cholesterol, raise blood pressure, and damage heart tissue. Researchers have studied communities that have banned smoking at work sites and in public places, and heart attacks in those communities have gone down. Chemicals in tobacco smoke harm your blood cells, which leads to heart damage. They increase arteriosclerosis or plaque in the arteries, increasing stroke risk, particularly for African Americans. 70% of all smokers would like to quit. This warrant article would facilitate a tobacco-free generation by not allowing sales of tobacco products in Brookline to people born after 2000. We've heard that cutting back on the number of people who can buy tobacco will harm the bottom line of those stores or gas stations that sell such products. And I'm sorry about that. And I'd certainly be open to discussing other ways they might compensate for that. But the harm to smokers, and particularly young people who might get hooked for a lifetime, and family members and friends who get the secondhand smoke, is very great. We need to take a stand to reduce that harm. True, smokers might simply go down the road to Boston to buy their cigarettes, but for the 70% who want to quit, this may help to move them along. And for the young people who are on the verge of starting, let's help them out by putting temptation a little farther away. Let's let them know that this community recognizes the harm that smoking can do and make people think twice before they smoke. Thank you. I urge favorable action.
Ms. Albuquerque?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ann Albuquerque for Precinct 1 and the professor at BU's Business School. I think this warrant article tackles a problem at its core. It says, let us make it impossible for future generations that are not yet addicted to purchase a lethal product that is costly to the town and society, while at the same time not putting restrictions on those that currently smoke. There are about 3,200 smokers in Brookline right now, and nothing will change for them under this article. So what are the consequences for business in Brookline? This article will impact business owners very slowly, thus giving them ample time to make adjustments away from nicotine products. In essence, the impact of this article on business is actually much smaller than the impact of restricting the sale of menthol flavored tobacco products that the town approved already in 2019. Moreover, no business in Brookline has tobacco as their sole source of revenue. And adjusting to shifts in consumer demand is part of a firm's regular business operations. In fact, given current consumer preferences towards environmentally friendly products, this may even help retailers get more business. I also want to speak to the free market idea that adults can sell and consumers can buy any product. This idea has limitations. When the seller can, in a matter of several weeks, addict a buyer to a product, there is no longer an exchange between equals in a free market. Once you are addicted, you are not entirely free. And addiction is good for business, as it means demand is inelastic. According to the World Health Organization and the US Surgeon General, nicotine is unusually addictive in a manner that is similar to cocaine. Each year, over $4 billion are spent on healthcare in Massachusetts, and each family in Massachusetts and Brookline pays about $950 of taxes for smoking-related expenditures. Whether you smoke or not, you pay about $1,000.
1 minute.
It kills more people than alcohol, HIV, car crashes, illegal drugs, suicides, murders, all combined. Hopefully, this warrant article will nudge neighborhood towns and then the state to implement the slow phasing out of this lethal product, and Brookline can continue its leadership as a laboratory for policy reform on nicotine products. We are not alone in this pursuit. As an example, Boston College prohibited smoking, vaping, or using any tobacco or plant product by faculty, staff, and students on all its campuses this year. This warrant article will not change the need for education on the risks of smoking or on the need to support smokers in their desire for cessation. But it does state a long-term vision for the future, and it provides a method to get there, one that Brookline has long supported. I urge favorable action on warrant Article 14. Thank you.
Ms. Toomey?
Could you see me?
We can hear you,
Okay, great.
which is the more important part, I suppose.
Say hi, I'm Maura Toomey from Precinct 8. The last time I spoke regarding tobacco was the flavor ban, which was a much bigger proposal than this. I'm not going to go on because everybody has spoken. I'm clearly a petitioner on this article, but the few things that I'd like to say this evening, that ending the sale of tobacco is nothing new. The tobacco industry has repeatedly opposed this, and public health groups have endorsed it. It would send a strong message that local government is finally acting to protect public health by making policy that demonstrates the dangers of tobacco. I urge you to vote in favor of this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sobol.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Kate Silbaugh, town meeting member, precinct 1 and co-petitioner. I think this warrant article is easy to understand and elegant, and I hope the town meeting members will continue in your historic role as leaders, not to completely solve the problem of tobacco, but to continue contributing to the solution by modeling and testing reforms. Harry mentioned something about the legality of the warrant article, and I just wanted to say the state recently adopted 21 age statewide following your decision to set Brookline's age at 21, and the state now preempts towns' ability to raise it to say 25 as an age. So we spoke with Mark Gottlieb, the executive director of the Northeastern Public Health Advocacy Institute, to develop this different approach, which is not preempted. And his organization has offered to support the town's legal effort if there should need to be one. We also work with DJ Wilson at the Mass Municipal Association, and he supports this approach. And now maybe it's a
1 minute.
thing, but this measure has drawn some libertarian ire, and so I just wanted to speak directly to that. We prohibit all kinds of purchases that are unsafe and that impose on society. I'm not free to buy lead paint, even though it is more durable. And there are 480,000 deaths a year from smoking, $300 billion a year to cover smoking related illnesses. African Americans smoke fewer cigarettes and start smoking cigarettes at an older age, but they are more likely to die from smoking than whites. We prohibited new gas hookups here in Brookline. They're legal, but they conflict with our long-term vision. It's true that no local ordinance is going to change the world overnight. This one is incremental in order to reduce the pain on both the smokers and the shop owners. I think that's why this warrant article has the support of Raul Fernandez, Nancy Heller, and Tommy Vitolo. Indeed, this approach was Tommy's idea 10 years ago. We don't have to wait for other towns or the state or the feds to act first. Any long-term solution to the harms of nicotine begins with a local ordinance or bylaw. This warrant article sets a slow-moving vision of a long-term future without tobacco, accomplished as painlessly as possible. Like our climate change, innovation, and leadership, this is what we do best in Brookline Town Meeting. We can be proud to be a part of this movement, and I urge you to join us in voting favorable action on warrant article 14.
Thank you, Ms. Priestley. I'm going to hear from a couple of people at the mics. Ms. Priestley?
Hi, Vina Priestley, Precinct 4. So I just had like 2 questions, actually 3. So with freedom of choice, like, you know, when is it too much kind of to take from somebody's choice? You know, if somebody wants to smoke and they're of legal age, would we still be having this conversation if it was in regards to alcohol? Alcohol too causes liver cancer and other damaging to the body. So that's one of my points. My other question is, did we talk to local businesses before pronouncing this article in front of us? Did local businesses that sell tobacco products have a hearsay in this? And Is there a local business that is here tonight that can comment on that?
We don't have any local business people signed up to speak, but Mr. Ishak, maybe you can tell us what efforts were made to consult with the local business community.
Yes, so this warrant article did go before EdBack and the small business community, and they had a chance to review the warrant article at the very beginning, the earliest stages when there was a different date that was proposed. And as petitioners, we took their thoughts into consideration with the adjustment of the date to January 2000. Did you also want me to answer the alcohol question or no?
No, that it's the cigarettes are on the agenda here tonight. Mr. Well, Mr. Burstein.
Michael A. Burstein, town meeting member, precinct 12. I have a question for either a petitioner or an expert, possibly one and the same. I've been doing a little research and came across the figure of 400,000 Americans dying a year from tobacco-related causes. And I'm just wondering if there's an expert who can confirm that figure or can state if that figure is either too low or too high. Given that we've been talking about the 250,000 dead Americans from COVID, 400,000 Americans dead a year strikes me as significant for this warrant article. Thank you.
I think Ms. Daly cited that exact figure. Ms. Daly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. What's the annual death rate from smoking?
The figure I cited was 1 in every 5 deaths. I think somebody else mentioned that number, so I don't have that.
Okay. All right, we're going to hear from one more. This is a gentleman who will vent his libertarian ire, Mr. Friedman.
Mr. Moderator, Harry Friedman, Precinct 12. I'm not going to be irate against anybody. I was just wondering if we might hear from town council on their opinion of the legality of this proposed bylaw.
Certainly. Ms. Correa?
Good evening, everybody. Patty Correa, First Assistant Town Council. The reason why I raised a concern about the possible illegality, which will in the end be determined by the Attorney General's office and bylaw review, is that the state law from 2018 that established the age of 21, minimum age of 21, states this act shall preempt any inconsistent, conflicting local law relating to the minimum sales age to purchase tobacco products. And so obviously birth date is quite closely tied to age. The discussion tonight has repeatedly referred to age. And so it's possible that the AG's office will determine that this proposal is preempted by that language in the state act. And we'll find out if this is approved here and then goes to the Attorney General's office.
Yes, the Attorney General has to approve our amendments of bylaws, and that's the forum in which this question will be ultimately determined. I have a motion for the question, but I have only one other speaker, and it's Ms. Frawley, and I know the dire consequences of cutting Ms. Frawley off, so I'm going to let her address the meeting, and then we'll go to a vote. Ms. Frawley?
In fact, I was helping out with a classmate to arrange for our high school reunion, which was put off because of COVID. With the hard research we each did, we found out that half our class is dead. And the number one reason, we didn't do drugs, we did cigarette, that kind of drugs. And most of the deaths were attributed to smoke-related deaths. It's real, it's very real. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. On the motion on page 14-12 over to 14-13, this will be a recorded vote as the others are. And we're ready for main motion, Article 14. All right, the voting period has commenced. All right, the voting period to Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Dewart,
Yes.
Ms. McNally,
McNally, yes.
what's the count?
136 yes, 78 no, 11 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 139 in favor, 78 opposed, and 11 abstentions. Article 15. The motion offered under Article 15 is on page 15-10. It's a motion to refer the subject matter of warrant Article 15 to the Select Board for a report back to town meeting with a plan for implementation no later than the 2021 annual town meeting, moved by Mr. Bors, seconded by Mr. Green. Mr. Bors.
Good evening, Harry Bors speaking on behalf of the Advisory Committee. Article 15 seeks to establish a town-defined disadvantaged business enterprise program known as a DBE here in Brookline, a program that can better direct our town contracts and procurements toward traditionally underrepresented, disadvantaged minority and women businesses. The petitioner cites well-established and troubling national statistics, numbers that change stubbornly and likely need a structural catalyst to achieve the changes envisioned. The broad goals of this article should be pursued by the town. We know we can do better, and we should do better. Though this is a very complex legal and logistical exercise that will take analysis and funding. State procurement laws prescribe some of our purchasing patterns, including adherence to the lowest bidder provision. We do benefit from inclusion in state contracts that include us in existing DBE programs. And likewise, the town's very own bylaws, section 4.4 and 4.5, set standards for inclusive procurements, though any program will have to comport with state statute. The legal impediments are also daunting. Federal law and Supreme Court precedent make race-conscious preferences very difficult to establish and easily challenged, with the associated liabilities. In establishing a program, Brookline will first need to identify and demonstrate its historical contracting and procurement history, explicitly specifying products, markets, and levels of disparities. Again, this is a significant and likely costly project requiring sophisticated data analysis and probably new software tools. This disparity study, however, is seen as a requisite for establishing a DBE program. There are agencies within Massachusetts, such as Massport, which have DBE programs, and they are substantiated by rigorous disparity studies. A municipality cannot rely on the study or data of another agency or municipality. Boston attempted this approach. The legal challenges and costs forced Boston to abandon its program. The lesson is that this is a very complex issue requiring formidable preparation and analysis prior to the establishment of the program. In closing, it was clear to the advisory committee that everyone involved shares a set of common aspirations, and the town and the petitioner have been working productively together through the existing town working group to pursue those aspirations. It's a significant issue and a significant project, and it will take the effort of town staff and likely the input of outside experts or consultants, as well as the investment in analytical tools. So that is why we are recommending referral to the select board, which is effectively referring to the existing working group, in order to continue this effort and come back to us by the spring town meeting with a plan for implementation. And so by a vote of 21 to 1 to 2, the advisory committee is recommending referral of this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Brown, town meeting member, Precinct 1. I agree with much of what Mr. Boris said. I don't believe that it's going to be the high hurdle that we think it will be. I do think, however, the work has to be done, the predicate has to be laid. And you know, the town has started some of the work, so there are efficiencies in, for now, tabling this. And honestly, if the town does not move quickly enough, I will resubmit the warrant article. So that's my statement.
Thank you. Mr. Green? Mr. Green?
Muted.
There we go.
Okay, start the clock again. Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Bernard Green, Chair of the Select Board, speaking for a unanimous Select Board. Some of what I plan to say has already been stated by Mr. Boers and Ms. Brown, but I'll go forward with some things I think need to be emphasized. Warrant Article 15 is a proposal submitted by petition to amend general bylaws to add a new Article 4.6 titled Increasing Disadvantaged Business Opportunities in the Town of Brookline. The stated intent of the bylaw is to require equity in the procurement of municipal goods and services, including giving additional consideration to Brookline residents meeting the definition of disadvantaged businesses. The bylaw creates a Brookline definition of DBEs and establishes Town of Brookline DBE goals. The subject of giving minority or women businesses additional consideration when the town awards contracts, however, is more complex and perilous than I think is suggested by Warrant Article 15. Government procurement is highly regulated. It implicates Supreme Court rulings that are not friendly to anti-discrimination programs, including race-based contracting programs. Those rulings create multiple opportunities for litigation by unsuccessful non-DBE vendors or contractors when a town fails to carefully establish their programs in accordance with Supreme Court rulings. As Town Council has noted, the Supreme Court has limited race-based preferences in public contracting except in limited circumstances, defined in a well-known case, Richmond versus Croson, where the court held that governments must establish a compelling interest to support the creation of contracting programs that specifically target minority and/or women-owned businesses. A compelling interest could be established by data showing the existence of historical racial disparities in town contracting in the form of a disparity study, which collects and examines quantifiable procurement and contracting data to determine whether disparity in the awarding of contracts exists. For the above reasons, the Advisory Committee and the Select Board voted to refer the complexities of Warrant Article 15 to the Select Board, which will oversee and direct an existing staff working group that is considering options to increase the diversity of the town's vendors of goods and services. This group includes the town administrator, chief diversity officer, chief procurement officer, human resources director, and town council. The working the working group will recommend to the select board or town meeting necessary changes in the bylaws or the policies and practices of town departments to accomplish many of the goals of warrant Article 15, pending completion of a disparity study and the creation of a more robust program. Therefore, the select board by a vote of 5-0 voted referral of warrant Article 15 to the select board. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Green. On the motion is for a referral, as Mr. Green stated, on page 15-10. We're ready for the voting period to commence. This is Article 15, motion to refer. Okay, the voting period has commenced. Yes, if you favor the vote to the motion to refer. No, if you're opposed, and abstain if you're abstaining. Voting period has elapsed. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dewart?
Yes.
And Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes, for referral.
Right. Motion carries by a vote of 209 in favor, 14 opposed, and 5 abstentions. There is no motion offered under Article 16, so we proceed to Article 17, where the main motion is on page 17-6 over to page 17-7 to amend the articles in the bylaws to provide that this is Article 17, to provide that for certain changes in the election laws. And it's moved by Mr. Gordon, seconded by Mr. Sandman. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. One member of the advisory committee speaking as petitioner. If you run for townwide office in Brookline or campaign in favor of or in opposition to a ballot question, or in some cases run for town meeting, you probably know the drill. Under cover of darkness on Election Day Eve, your allies scurry around with signs, staples, duct tape, cable ties, and more, the more being campaign secrets that I'm not at liberty to disclose. The following morning, as the polls open, voters are greeted by an array of candidate and ballot question signs. Signs which in the aggregate say to us, this is what democracy looks like. It's common practice in Brookline for polls to be dressed this way. Common practice, yes. Legal practice, no. The current sign bylaw is clear. No person shall erect, display, or maintain a temporary or permanent sign upon any property owned by the town of Brookline or upon the public way of any governmental body. On election day, by custom, those charged with enforcement have simply looked the other way. Ask the town clerk what time on election eve you can put up signs, and he might say, I'm in bed by 9 p.m. We can't know what a future town clerk might say, and there is a better way. The proposed bylaw amendment codifies what's implicitly been allowed by custom. An amended bylaw will protect us against strict enforcement of the sign bylaw by elected officials or overzealous town employees, against demands for enforcement from members of the public, and especially demands that may be arbitrary or, in the face of a competitive campaign, partisan. An amended bylaw will protect us from arbitrary grants of permission, implicit or explicit, by our government on days when we as citizens exercise the most fundamental and basic right. And yes, as some have pointed out, there's a risk that signs having nothing to do with elections might also be posted. That's true now. I bring this article to codify the status quo. There are no costs associated with this proposed bylaw change, and I ask for a vote of favorable action on Article 17. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birnbaum? B-I-R-N, Baum.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ben Birnbaum, an at-large member of the Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to report the singular news that both the Advisory Committee and the Select Board support the Advisory Committee's motion with virtual unanimity. I'll also note that the petitioner most agreeably found the 3 amendments advanced by the Advisory Committee and approved by the Select Board to be entirely acceptable. Briefly put, and as Neil has already said, Article 17 seeks to regularize a commonplace practice in Brookline that is presently illegal under town law. And he described that practice to you better than I could. State law tells us regarding election day displays, and I paraphrase here, that no poster, etc., shall be posted in the polling place, etc., within 150 feet of the building entrance door. One result of these competing commandments, town bylaw, state law, and practice, is that while complaints are few, enforcement of the Brookline law is rare and irregular. And rare and irregular law enforcement is an invitation to unhappiness. So drawing on some of the state law's precepts, the bylaw proposed here would help people who hang political signs on election day to act within the law. In that election day would, by order of the town, become a day on which signs, etc., up to a particular size are allowed on public property within 500 feet of a polling place entrance, but no closer than 150 feet. I won't go into detail regarding the 3 amendments to the original article, which I believe are clearly explained in the Advisory Committee write-up, and as noted earlier, are just fine with the petitioner. The Advisory Committee voted favorable action on Article 17 by a count of 27-0 and 1 abstention, and recommends favorable action to this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Raul Fernandez for the Select Board, a unanimous Select Board. We're glad that the petitioner and the Advisory Committee have reached an agreement. We support it, and we encourage you to do so as well unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for a vote. Main motion, Article 17. This is the motion found on page 17-6 over to page 17-7. And the voting period has commenced. Voting period has, Mr. Jones. Mr. Dewart,
Do we,
it was a yes vote. Ms. McNally,
McNally, yes.
and the count?
211 yes, 1 no, 7 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 214 in favor, 1 opposed, and 7 abstentions. Now, we've deferred Articles 18 through 20 to November to be dealt with at the next session of town meeting, which is on November 30. Those will be the first 3 articles before us that evening. So we turn to Article 21. The main motion on Article 21 is on pages 21-2 to 21-3, moved by Mr. Margolis, seconded by Mr. Bassett. The advisory committee has a counter proposal, which is found on page 21-7, would in effect delete everything but the last paragraph. And I will let the speakers describe the differences between the 2 positions. Call on Mr. Margolis for 5 minutes. Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Margolis, Precinct 7, excuse me. The motto of the Washington Post is that democracy dies in darkness. And indeed it does, as we have seen over the past 4 years. Our proposed amendment to the original Article 21 seeks to cast some light into the dark. It would limit the number of cases in which the town could require non-disclosure agreements when it settles claims. Specifically, the town would be barred from seeking such agreements only in cases involving racial or sexual harassment or police misconduct. I should say cases involving claims of those wrongs, not necessarily decided cases. After Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump, after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, after Me Too and Black Lives Matter, I foolishly thought that there would be no more opposition to this proposal than to the appointment of measures of wood and bark, though perhaps with fewer bad puns. I underestimated the natural human desire to avoid having embarrassing or possibly unlawful actions brought to public attention. My bad. If you will, join me in a thought experiment. Suppose that when Gerald Alston heard the horrible message from his superior on his voicemail, he had gone immediately to the town and made a claim for redress. And suppose that the town had offered him a certain amount of money, and for whatever reason that he had accepted the offer. Then assume that the town also required that he sign a non-disclosure agreement and that he did so. If that had happened, few of us would know anything about what took place. My question for each of you is whether you believe that the Brookline community would have been better off if we did not know. Surely most of us would have been more comfortable in our ignorance, but would the community really be in a better place? If your answer to that question is yes, then by all means, vote no action on this article. But if you agree with me that for all the pain and anger that the Alston matter has caused, we as a community are better off for knowing what took place, then I urge you as strongly as I can to vote in favor of this amendment, to ensure some of the transparency on which democratic government depends. Last week in my precinct, we had a review of the warrant. One of the members of the advisory committee was there, and when we got to this article, she began her defense of the committee's position by saying, you know, there are always two sides to every story. Indeed, there are. We believe that the public should have a full opportunity to hear the two sides. But the idea behind non-disclosure agreements is that it is better for the public to hear no sides than to get both of them. That is wrong. It is true that barring the town from insisting on non-disclosure agreements may have implications that don't always seem fair, but they are not sufficient to justify keeping relevant facts about the behavior of town employees from the public. The need for transparency is essential to democracy on the national level and also here in Brookline. Just for a moment, the motion of the advisory committee, as the moderator said, merely to adopt the last paragraph that is in our amendment, would give only summary reports that would not reveal any part of the facts surrounding claims. That is not transparency. It may feel good, it may look good on the surface, but it does not give citizens what they ought to have, which is to know what really happened, even if they have to know by listening to different opinions about what took place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Granoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Susan Granoff, Precinct 7 Town Meeting Member, speaking for Unanimous Advisory Committee. By a vote of 26-0, the Advisory Committee recommends favorable action only on the paragraph of Warrant Article 21 that would increase the town's public reporting requirements about settlements, and no action on the rest of the article that would restrict the town's use of non-disclosure agreements in settlement agreements. The Advisory Committee strongly supports the petitioner's addition to the town's bylaws that would require an annual public reporting of all claims resolved by the town for a sum greater than $25,000. This would include the department that was alleged to have committed wrongdoing in the claim, the amount of the settlement, and the nature of the claim. We agree with the petitioner that in the interest of providing greater transparency regarding the spending of town dollars on the settlement of claims against it, it is important to make this reporting an annual legal requirement rather than a voluntary choice by town council. However, the Advisory Committee strongly opposes the provisions of Warrant Article 21 that would prohibit the town and select board from entering into NDAs when settling claims alleging racial or sexual harassment or police misconduct. Warrant Article 21 would remove a critical litigation tool from the town's legal toolbox that helps to encourage a timely settlement of these kinds of claims. NDAs are a standard part of almost all settlement agreements. They permit both parties to move on and not have to litigate cases or facts in dispute in public forums for years to come. The town cannot compel anyone to accept a settlement agreement containing an NDA, but there would be little reason for the town to enter into a settlement agreement without one. A settlement can benefit both parties. It saves both of them the time and expense of protracted and often ugly discovery and litigation. It eliminates the risk of an adverse outcome at trial or on appeal, and it brings closure sooner rather than after years of dispute. For the claimant, a settlement has an added advantage. The claimant gets money or other requested relief in a timely fashion without ever having to prove the truth of their allegations before a judge or jury. This is because settlements are agreements to disagree without requiring either side to prove any of their allegations or version of facts. That the town agrees to settle a matter does not mean that the factual allegations of the claimant are true or that the town or its employees have committed any wrongdoing. For the town, a key advantage of any settlement is that it offers it the opportunity to avoid the damage to the town's reputation in the media that prolonged litigation can bring. This is the type of reputational damage that may be difficult or impossible for the town to recover from. To avoid such damage, the town may be willing to settle unproven claims and factual assertions that are of questionable merit, but only if the settlement agreements contain NDAs. There would be little reason or incentive for the town to enter into settlements of such claims if, post-settlement, a claimant could continue to go to the media to publicize their version of events and disputed facts, no matter how untrue or one-sided. Further, due to confidentiality and privacy laws that the town is subject to, the town, unlike the claimant, is restricted in the type of information it is legally permitted to release to the public outside a courtroom. And so it would be limited in its ability to publicly rebut any inaccurate or incomplete public statements made by claimants to the media. As a result, the town and its employees would be subject to unwarranted reputational damage post-settlement, and the public would get to hear only a one-sided version of allegations and certainly not the full truth. Finally, if settlement agreements of certain claims were not permitted to contain NDAs, the town would be much less likely to settle those claims, and more claims against the town would be brought to trial, thereby resulting in significantly more litigation costs both to the town and to claimants. So for all of these reasons, the advisory committee unanimously recommends a vote of no action on all but the last paragraph of warrant Article 21, which we unanimously recommend favorable action on.
Thank you. I neglected to mention that the advisory committee's motion was made by Ms. Granoff, seconded by Mr. Van Scoyac. I call on Mr. Doldren.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Malcolm Doldren, Town Meeting Members, Precinct 6, speaking for majority CDICR by a vote of 10 yeses, 1 opposed, 0 abstentions. Recommending favorable action on the main motion of warrant Article 21. NDAs are nothing new as a legal tool, and warrant Article 21 will not keep them from being used entirely, but it will give us clear boundaries about the enforceable scope of NDAs in Brookline. NDAs prevent the public from knowing about predatory conduct that harms us and stops government officials from being able to perform critical law enforcement duties that are designed to protect us. And by concealing racial discrimination, sexual harassment and abuse, and police misconduct, we lose the deterrent effect that results when we shine light on offenders. Consider some of the company we keep. Should we continue to routinely use this practice? NDAs were used by ex-movie mogul Harvey Weinstein and his company to settle allegations of sexual misconduct. NDAs are used repeatedly in Silicon Valley tech firms where companies that say they believe in racial equity routinely underemploys, underpays, and discriminates against people of color. NDAs were used by the Catholic Church to protect pedophiles for decades, paying billions of dollars in settlements to victims while not shielding others from future abuse. From Larry Nassar, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, Bill Cosby, and even the current occupant of the White House, the blatant use of NDAs is all about keeping powerful entities in power and their reputations untarnished and not protecting victims and the vulnerable. In response, many organizations and institutions have simply stopped using NDAs as a broader commitment to taking issues of racism, sexual harassment, and other forms of wrongdoing seriously, settling cases on their merits rather than whether they can get silence from an individual. That's the standard Brookline should live by. By a vote of 10 yeses, 1 no, 0 abstentions, the CDICR recommends favorable action on main motion warrant Article 21.
Thank you, Mr. Van Scoyac.
Thank you very much, John Van Scoik, for the Select Board. And I want to say it feels very good to be speaking on the same side of an issue as Susan Granoff. Article 21 is a proposal submitted by petition that would amend the general bylaws of the town prohibiting the select board from requiring or conditioning in any settlement agreement that the claimant refrain from disclosing the terms of the settlement or the underlying claim. The proposed article would also require the town to report publicly all claims resolved through settlement. Versions of this proposal were previously considered and defeated twice by town meeting. All of the arguments, pro and con, presented at that time remain today. Town council continues to advise the select board that the bylaw amendment would substantially impair the ability of the town to resolve claims without expending significant town resources in litigation. There are several strategic reasons why it may be in the best interest of the parties to enter into these kinds of agreements. The town regularly discloses the essential details of settlement agreements to the public upon request. It does not object to reporting this information more publicly and regularly. A 3-2 majority of the select board believe that while well-intentioned, the petitioner's proposal is not in the town's best interests. This vote did support an amended version advanced by the advisory committee that eliminated the proposed prohibition of non-disclosure agreements, but required the select board to publicly report all such agreements. I will quote from our town council, Jocelyn Murphy, who knows firsthand how Article 21 would negatively impact the options for settling cases without trial, to the detriment of Brookline and arguably to the detriment of claimants against Brookline as well. Here's what Jocelyn Murphy wrote. As town meeting members thoughtfully deliberate Article 21, I sincerely hope that they will consider that unlike private employers that have for so many years hidden cases of sexual harassment from the public, taxpayer-supported entities like the town are unable to hide such settlements because of laws like the open meeting and public record laws that require transparency, as they should. And continuing to quote from her letter, I welcome the amendment offered by the advisory committee that calls for the affirmative publication of these settlements on the town's website and that accomplishes the goal of adding an additional layer of transparency without unfairly prejudicing the town's litigation resources. And that's the final word from Jocelyn Murphy. I just want to add one more word. Yes, it's true. Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump, you can cite any number of horrors that have involved abuses of these types of non-disclosure agreements. However, let's also acknowledge that there are countless cases where claimants got settlement agreements and there were non-disclosure agreements, and they benefited enormously from being able to access non-disclosure agreements. And that access is hampered if they aren't even allowed to know that the town in this instance would be willing to make a generous settlement if it included a non-disclosure agreement. So, be thinking about the claimants and not just Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump and the many who have abused non-disclosure agreements. The select board, by 3-2 vote, recommends favorable action on Article 21 as amended by the advisory committee.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. I'm sorry. Yep, Mr. Margolis, a point of order. If you're
Yes,
just disagreeing with something that's been said, that's not a point of order, but
Well, I believe Mr. Van Scoy perhaps inadvertently made a factual misstatement in describing the article. If that's not a
I'll
point of
put
order,
you on
I'll
the
shut
list.
up.
Mr. Margolis, I'll put you on the list to rebut, but that's not a point of order. Mr. Bassett?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Bassett, Precinct 6. Three kinds of claims and 3 big reasons to support this article. Please support the whole article, and please vote no action on the advisory committee amendment. 3 claims have already been mentioned: racial and sexual harassment and police misconduct. 3 reasons that convince me to support it are sunlight, claimants' rights, and settlements. Think of what Mr. Margolis said. It's absolutely good that we know what happened in Mr. Olson's case. We're much better off for knowing it and for the conversations that have happened since this 10-year period, during this 10-year period. It does give us a little information or some information in these cases. Claimants' rights. The table now is tilted very much in favor of the town. The town has the resources. The town can go to court. The town has the advantage. This tilts the field back a little bit in the direction of the claimants. The claimants can still, Ms. Granoff said that if this passes, there won't be non-disclosure agreements. Not quite. The claimants can still insist on non-disclosure agreements. It does give claimants much greater access to the settlement process. It does increase claimants' rights. The third reason is contrary to what Town Council Jocelyn Hamm has said. I feel it will, at least in some cases, greatly increase the chances of a settlement. For those claimants who want to state publicly.
1 minute.
Thank you. The reasons for their claim, it tells them that the town cannot insist on a non-disclosure agreement, and it makes it more likely, I think, that claimants will agree to negotiate a settlement. Finally, it takes 2 parties, of course, to agree to a settlement, and either party can, for whatever reason, still decide not to negotiate a settlement. But please support the whole Article 21. Please vote no on the advisory committee amendment. I think this puts us a significant step forward in the direction of sunlight and also in increasing settlements and avoiding the kind of 10-year rolling disaster that's resulted from Mr. Olson's mistreatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Non-disclosure agreements are used in cases in which the involved parties do not agree on the facts of the case. The parties choose to participate or not. No one is forced to participate. It is a means to reach closure when the involved parties disagree. Given that human beings do not always agree on the facts, both parties should have the option of using this legal mechanism. When parties decide together to use NDAs, they are enabled to reach closure sooner than if they had to go to trial. The town already publishes the nature and amounts of settlements in claims of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. The advisory committee motion would make that current practice a legal requirement, which would codify and expand the town's public reporting obligations and which will increase transparency. Creating a situation in which only one party can publicize their representation of the facts in dispute and the other side cannot because, for example, the disputed facts may involve medical records and employment records which the town is not allowed to release without the permission of the involved parties, actually does not increase transparency. Even the petitioner tonight described relating opinions of the matter. Opinions do not constitute facts. Please vote favorable action on the motion of the advisory committee.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the motion of the advisory committee will be to delete the first 2 paragraphs on the top of page 21-3, the first 2 underlined paragraphs of Mr. Margolis's motion, leaving only the last paragraph. Mr. Rosenthal. You're on. Click on your mute button. Going. What's that? Martin Rosenthal is. Okay, well, while you solve his problem for him, we'll hear from Mr. Sandman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Sandman, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member and Chair of the Advisory Committee. I asked the same question now. I will ask the same question now that I asked last year when we had a similar article before us. Is there any reason why a claimant cannot speak to the media and inform the public about their claim before they sign an NDA? Mr. Alston may or may not ultimately settle and sign an NDA, but meanwhile, until he does, he has been public about his complaint as his absolute right. Wouldn't that still be the case if the advisory committee amendment is voted? And I suppose I asked this of both Mr. Margolis and Town Council, who provided the answer last time.
Well, let's hear from Town Council. Ms. Murphy?
Good evening, Jocelyn Murphy, Town Council, also a resident of Precinct 16. The answer is you're quite right, Mr. Sandman. As we've seen in Mr. Alston's case and others, some claimants, of which there are, I would point out, very few, have been very public about the allegations. And I want to be clear, these are only allegations in each of these claims. They have been very clear and they have published far and wide the allegations. There's no reason why they could not in advance of entering into a settlement agreement with an NDA.
Thank you. That's your answer. Ms. Brown?
Deborah Brown, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm actually going to read a statement. I have been on both sides of employment discrimination cases. I've seen gender bias cases, and I've been involved in police misconduct cases. The one thing that is unique about these is that typically you have a complainant who does not have a deep pocket, and the system just grinds you down. So this notion as if both sides have the same amount of money, the same kinds of access to information, that's just bogus. By the time you're done with a claim of that nature, you are just worn out. So we need to look at NDAs as creating some deterrence for bad supervisors and bad employees, people who discriminate. You know, it's not really voluntary if a third of organizations actually have language too that in some ways require them. You know, NDAs really demand silence. You know, they're typically broadly worded, and they're going to put you in a negative light if you try to break them. They demand a secrecy of sorts. And I mean a dirty secrecy of sorts. It's almost as if you accept a settlement in exchange for maybe what is actually calling for you to violate a moral duty. So it's almost like blood money. It's an immoral blackmail in a way. And then people that talk about them as if they're lofty and, it's an equal kind of transaction. That might be true in a technical kind of, an intellectual property kind of situation, or a complex banking situation. But when you start talking about, gender bias, racial discrimination, and police, as a municipality, as a town, we have an obligation to air our dirty laundry. It may cost us a little more money, but we owe our citizenry the safety, literally the safety of knowing that we don't have people on the payroll who beat people up. We don't have people on the payroll who are calling people the N-word. We don't have people on the payroll who, assign people work that's inferior to their pay grade. Those people should be drummed out. And if we use NDA agreements, we're not going to get to them the same way we might otherwise. So let's
one minute.
NDAs. Pardon me?
1 minute.
Oh, thank you. So I would encourage us not to look at an NDA as so much protecting the town, but look at it as an NDA as actually hurting the individuals that bring these claims, but also every member of the community that may at some point be the subject or the victim of the very people that we may never know about. Again, we're not talking intellectual property here. We're not talking high-level contracts. We're talking largely about people who behaved badly. So I support Mr. Margolis's warrant article and not the AC's motion. Air our dirty laundry. It's good for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
Look at the new guy that just came in. The other one is actually still unmuted, so I'm going to mute him. So there's two of them in here. He's been asked to unmute. The other guy is unmuted. Nobody's responded.
Well, Mr. Rosenthal, I don't know where you are out there, but we're going to have to proceed with Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Would like to respond to a couple of the remarks that have been made by earlier speakers. I don't recall who it was who spoke about that it's unequal, that if the claimant's story is one-sided and not true and not accurate, and the town wouldn't have the chance to rebut it. I would suggest that that's a false analogy. If the claimant's claim was weak, was untrue, was one-sided, the town wouldn't settle. I think that the town has better counsel than that. The town wouldn't settle such a claim. The second is the notion that no one is forced to engage, no one is forced to settle or no one is forced to enter an NDA in order to settle the case. And that I can tell you from my experience as a lawyer, handling many police misconduct cases and discrimination cases, that is the most unfair thing about the NDA, in that very often the money that is being offered is not being offered because the municipality or the town or the police department has any interest in doing right. What they're doing is buying silence, and it's very hard to tell a client that, well, you're being offered all this money that you need to make up for the wrong that's been done to you, or the harm that's been caused to you, or the time you haven't been able to work because you were wrongfully fired, or the money or the time that you lost from work because you were beaten by the police. And they're not paying you to do you justice. They're paying you so you won't talk about it. NDAs are one of the most one-sided.
You got 1 minute.
Okay, let me get on to the next point then. It's just not true that no one is forced to engage in an NDA. They're not equal agreements. The other, to answer Mr. Sandman's suggestion that people are free to talk about their story before the litigation is concluded, it's not true. Lawyers don't let their clients talk before trial because they can be for all sorts of reasons. You don't play your cards before the game starts. You don't give away your ammunition before you see the whites of their eyes. And often a client is restrained for good reasons tactically of not telling his story until the time to tell the story, and then silence is bought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Frawley? I'm sorry? Mr. Stanman, if all you're doing is disagreeing with something that Mr. Fisher just said, that's not a point of order. But what is your point of order, sir?
In that case, I need to go back to the queue, but I do indeed disagree with Mr. Fisher's characterization.
Thank you. Ms. Frawley?
Thank you, Regina Frawley. Who have we heard from tonight in regard to this in giving examples? Have we heard from Gerald Alston? We have not. Have we heard from his attorney? We have not. What we heard was a very long explanation written out by, presented by John Van Scoyoc, Town Council. Town Council is a litigant in this. She is a named litigant. No conflict of interest has been raised. We've been watching this on the TMMA. Have you heard from Gerald Alston on the TMMA? No, you have not. Have you heard from his lawyer? No, you have not. What you have seen on the TMMA over the several months has been from Town Council. If you believe philosophically in the concept of deterrence, I think that Malcolm Daldron did an explicit, wonderful example of several examples, but the Catholic Church is something I happen to have expertise about. The priests, I have full file draws of it. The exposure of it has resulted in accountability, however poorly and however long it has taken for an institution that's thousands of years old. But it has made a difference. And we could do better than that. We can actually make a difference in the short run by exposing. When you have only Town Council's side or the town side of it, that often leaves the petitioner in the media as their only outlet. So we can't condemn them for having an outlet that they're not allowed to have on the TMMA or right here, right now at town meeting. So I happen to subscribe strongly to Andrew Fisher, to the petitioner, to Malcolm's thinking, to Deborah Brown's thinking. We have to expose this because the goal is not just justice for the complainants, but to deter the behavior going forward, which Deborah Brown very well articulated. We have to clean this up. There's too much that's under the rug, and that's not the town I like living in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Margolis?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Still John Margolis from Precinct 7, and I'd like to just correct what I think are a few misstatements that have been made. For one thing, Mr. Van Scoyoc, I think, made it sound like all non-disclosure agreements would be barred to the town. It's only a narrow category of what I suggest are the worst kinds of allegations made against, fortunately seldom made, but sometimes made against municipal employees. I can tell you from my own experience that despite what Town Council has said, it is not necessary for the town to go to trial in every case if there can't be a non-disclosure agreement. I know this because I have settled 2 civil rights cases against the city of Boston this year, one for $600,000 and one for many times that, I won't go into details because the last settlement papers have not been signed, but many times $600,000 for the settlement. And in neither case did the city utter a syllable about restricting the claimant's right to speak afterwards. So it is a choice to go to trial. It's maybe a legitimate choice, but it's a choice. The town could decide to settle without non-disclosure agreements. The issue is the public's right to know. It's not really about getting the best settlement for either side. It's about getting the best government. This is a political issue. It's not a litigation issue. At least that, in my view, that's the way it should be. Thank you.
Mr. Gaishak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Gaishak, Precinct 13. Litigator, most of my work is on the defense side. I just want to echo what Mr. Margolis just said about settlements. I was surprised to hear proponents of the advisory committee's version claim that the lack of ability on the town's part to impose or request non-disclosure terms would force the town to litigate rather than settle. Perhaps I'm missing something, but that is, as Mr. Margolis said, a choice that the town can make anytime. There is nothing that will make plaintiffs or petitioners or claimants that I can think of less likely to settle because we can't, as the town, impose NDAs. It is only that we, or at least those who make our legal decisions right now, won't want to settle because they'll be worried about our dirty laundry being aired. As many have said here, and I endorse Ms. Frawley most recently, that's the whole point. We need our dirty laundry to be aired to improve and to avoid those situations recurring in the first place. So unless anyone can think of a reason why the town actually can't offer settlements without NDAs, which I can't think of, I think people should treat the argument that we will be forced into litigation as purely a specious one and below the dignity of the discussion we should be having here. Thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal, I think you're on the phone. Star 6.
Is this okay?
Yep.
All right, well, I'll do my best. I've got the screen going too. Should I exit the Zoom?
No, you just talk. Tell us who
Okay.
you are.
All right, Marty Rosenthal, Precinct 9 for PACS and only for the advisory's motion. I'm cautiously I have to mute my screen because I'm getting blowback. All right, so I'm cautiously or foolishly optimistic that at least some of you saw, maybe even now have PACS's Sunday warrant letter. I'll highlight 3 points, beginning with what we started with. Petitioner appeals to politically correct transparency, to which we reply with Menkins, there's always a well-known solution to every human problem, neat, plausible, and wrong. This week I called a policy priority of some friends of mine who disagreed with me on something politically correct. One found that dismissive, which I very respectfully dispute. All we mean is Menkins above thought. How can sane people not favor transparency, especially now tonight that Mr. Alston's thrown in? Maybe I should have said siren song, but how many recall the Odyssey? What's our answer to transparency aside from the tiny speck we'd get from this? Actions have consequences, less settlements and more trials, and re-victimizing some claimants, like those who are pro se or having, oh my God, an unstellar lawyer. 21 doesn't ban NDAs, they'd be opt-in, but only if someone knows to ask for them. For others, town council is gagged. We've called that a kabuki dance. In 2008, a close friend and specialist in plaintiffs' sex discrimination cases said to me, many women don't want the facts to be public, and it's much harder to settle cases. She sent me some articles, one by Jessica Levinson, LA's Ethics Commission president. Real people will endure real hurt if sexual harassment NDAs are fully banned. In 2018, Tony Narrow, TMM5, and then a member of PACS's board and our diversity commission, wrote to us, my best friend does civil rights law and sues towns regularly. NDAs are very common. Rejecting one would likely end negotiations. I don't do such cases, but I do litigation. Settlements always involve quid pro quos. I have two questions I hope for John in closing. Would you tell your own clients about the NDA option and its pros and cons, and let them decide whether you can utter that phrase to town council? And secondly, earlier today and now tonight, you answered a straw argument that you posed a straw argument. The town council suggested if NDAs are banned, the town will fight every case all the way to trial. I sometimes disagree with town council on legal issues, but she and her staff are impeccably thoughtful and honest. Is she exaggerating when she says if settlements barred NDAs, the town will be much less likely to settle those claims and more claims would be brought to trial, resulting in significantly more litigation costs to both sides? Thank you very much.
Mr. Fernandez?
Fernandez, Select Board member, speaking in favor of the petitioner's motion. First of all, I do want to clear something up. We don't only settle cases when we disagree about the facts, as was incorrectly stated at least twice in this debate. We also settle cases to avoid litigation, including when we know we were wrong. There are times when the town may want to settle when we know harm has been done and we're likely to lose, especially in cases of discrimination based on race or gender or police misconduct. In these cases, conditioning settlements on the wronged party signing an NDA is only about avoiding embarrassment for the town at the expense of transparency and accountability. It's hush money, pure and simple, and is wrong. We have an opportunity to end that practice tonight, and I hope we'll take it in the name of all those who've been wronged in the worst way and have never been allowed to tell their story. Please join me in voting favorable action on the petitioner's motion. Thank you.
Ms. Westfall? I just called Ms. Westfall, so we'll hear from her and then take that motion.
Thank you. I want to speak.
Who are you?
My name is Christine Westfall. I live in Precinct 4, and I'm an at-large advisory committee member. I want to speak in favor of the advisory committee motion. If we do this, non-disclosure agreements will simply be another tool for plaintiffs' attorneys to use when they are involved in the negotiations, and we will not have that ability. Michael Sandman is right. Most of the cases that we are citing as egregious can get public attention and will get public attention prior to the point where they are either filed or litigated, or that a non-disclosure agreement is entered into. It's not like we got a whole lot of secrets that nobody knows about. It gets the publicity if it's serious. And in addition, it puts us at a real disadvantage in terms of cases that are questionable. You're right, there are some cases where we absolutely know we are wrong. And as a town, we usually respond fairly well to those cases, although I know that there's a lot of argument around that. But the reality is, we will know what's going on because it will get publicity. This will put us at a real disadvantage. Plaintiffs' attorneys will use it as a negotiating position. Rest assured, it will not end NDAs, and NDAs the inability to use an NDA will make us more likely to litigate in some circumstances, not all circumstances, but in some circumstances, to the disadvantage of claimants. Those things together will ultimately put not just the town in a worse advantage, but plaintiffs in a worse advantage. And we need not do that. It's not like this is the biggest problem we've ever had. I would suggest to you that if we talk about police misconduct, we think about the Breonna Taylor case, where there was settlement. I have no idea if there was an NDA. I have no idea what the settlement was, the civil
You have
settlement.
1 minute.
But I know that it happened, and I know what happened. And the same thing is true in the Alston case. If Gerald Alston entered into an NDA at this point, would anybody not know what had happened? Keep in mind that, and I hate to say this because I love my colleagues in the law, but virtually everybody that's supporting this is a plaintiff's attorney. They will use it. That's what, it's just a negotiating stick. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to call the question. I have the following people signed up to speak: Ms. Daly, Nancy Daly, Nancy Heller, Michael Sandman, Amy Hummel, Michael Offner, Ann Weaver, Deborah Brown, Donnell O'Neill, and Jim Franco. I will allow the motion for the question. Yes. All right, the time period has commenced. Yes, if you want to terminate debate. No, if you want to continue to argue. And abstain if you're abstaining. Oh, God. Okay, time's up. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dewart?
Stewart, yes.
Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 144 in favor, 68 opposed, and 11 abstentions. I'm sorry. Yes, the motion carries by a 2/3 vote. So we first deal with the advisory committee's motion to delete the top 2 paragraphs on page 21-3, preserve only the last paragraph of Mr. Margolis's motion. This requires a majority vote. This is Article 21 AC amendment. Voting period has started. Yes, if you wish to delete those first 2 paragraphs at the top of page 21-3. No, if you do not. Voting period is over. Jones? Mr.
Yes.
Jones? Yes. Mr. Dewart?
Stewart, yes.
Ms. McNally?
McNally, no.
You have the count?
93 yes, 120 no, 8 abstentions.
Motion fails by a vote of 95 in favor, 121 opposed, and 8 abstentions. So we now vote on the main motion, which is Mr. Margolis's motion on page 21-2 over to 21-3. This is main motion, Article 21. Voting period has started. The voting period has terminated.
Yes.
Mr. Dewart,
Yes.
and Ms. McNally.
McNally, yes.
The count, please.
143 yes, 66 no, 15 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 146 in favor, 66 opposed, and 15 abstentions. We now turn to Articles 22 and 23, which will be debated together. The motion under Article 22 is on page 20, top of page 22-3, moved by Ms. Margolis, Hadassah Margolis, seconded by Mr. Fernandez, that the town amend the general bylaws by substituting various things for various other things, as the motion displays. And on 23-2 is the motion under Article 23, moved by Mr. Gordon and seconded by Mr. Fernandez, that the town zoning bylaws be changed in the same manner to be gender neutral. Ms. Margolis.
Thank you. My name is Hadassah Margolis, Town Meeting Member Precinct 8, and I stand with Deborah Brown. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This discussion about pronouns tonight is a discussion about equity. Gender is a social structure that comes with expectations and power. We know now that the stories we told ourselves for so long about gender are not true. We can be proud of the progress we've begun in changing these expectations. This is another story within gender that is also not true. Gender is not binary. It's not so simple as he and she. It's not a light switch, one or the other. Rather, as educator Julie Chung writes, quote, it's a constellation. And what is the burden for those who feel they don't quite fit within the two options of cisgender he and she? 41% of transgender teens attempt or die by suicide each year because they feel isolated and stigmatized. The burden falls heaviest among those whose families reject them. According to the Family Acceptance Project, these young people rejected by their families are 8 times more likely to have attempted suicide. The project identified one behavior to promote acceptance and well-being: parents supporting a child's gender expression, including using their pronouns, even if the parents are uncomfortable doing so. That's it. When families accept someone's pronouns, they validate their identity and worth. This is why we have brought forth these warrant articles. to recognize that using only he or she in our town bylaws excludes and silences non-binary people and people who use other pronouns. The mechanics are simple. It is a universal search and replace for pronouns and minor verbs agreements. We distributed details of each instance to show that there is no confusing syntax and there is no change to the substance of the laws. If using the singular they is okay with the Washington Post, the AP, and the Oxford English Dictionary, it is okay for Brookline. Pronoun changes don't change the letter of Brookline's laws. They do change the spirit of our laws. By voting in favor, you will make a powerful statement about our commitment to representation, inclusivity, and equity, to making space. Last winter, there was almost unanimous support to change chairman to chair in our bylaws. This is the next logical step. Vote yes for warrant articles 22 and 23.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member. I use he, him, his pronouns. We've been moving in the right direction on this, and I'm glad that these petitioners have brought us something where we can move even further. These articles, as you've heard, propose to amend the town's general and zoning bylaws to change pronouns to gender neutral. The Select Board agrees unanimously that the changes proposed by the petitioners should be formally incorporated into our bylaws. The board is supportive of these changes, of course, which are part of an ongoing effort towards overall gender equality. And also they're necessary to recognize and affirm non-binary individuals, our residents, our neighbors in our community. The board thanks the petitioners for initiating the article and providing education on this important topic. We certainly support it unanimously, and we hope you will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lodish. LODIS.
Name's Pam Lodish, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 14, and a member speaking for the Advisory Committee. And by a vote of 23-0 with one abstention, the Advisory Committee recommends favorable action on the Select Board motion under Articles 22 and 23 and hopes the town meeting will agree.
Thank you. Catherine O'Connor.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine O'Connor, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm a senior at Brookline High School and an LGBTQ+ advocate in our state. And since middle school, I've felt really called to public service and see myself as a community leader. However, time and time again, I've had to give myself voice. In state house offices, at hearings, in classrooms, and even in this case, public policy. Adults have frequently redirected me away from activism and politics, telling me to stay in my lane and enjoy my youth. These comments and the unnecessary burden of having to make space for myself as an equal citizen of our Commonwealth are unacceptable. I should be able to see myself and everybody else in Brookline reflected through our public servants and in our laws. So for example, I didn't particularly want to get an ID when I turned 16 because I knew it wouldn't be accurate, gender marker wise, to the person that I know myself to be. Nonetheless, I went in for my permit test the day after the DMV announced that it would offer an X gender marker on licenses. In driver's ed, every lesson sparked a new conversation with a driving instructor who'd never heard of non-binary identity before. And each of those conversations were mutually educating experiences. So now I've become the friend in my group that drives all of my other friends around. And less fun, I've also become the sibling that has to drive my brother to soccer practice. In my mind, none of this was possible before having documents that would accurately identify me to our government. As Hadassah said, taking this step forward is a logical way to recognize everyone in Brookline, including people like me. And I'm more than happy to take thoughtful, respectful questions as they come up in this discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. But the speakers have been eloquent, and I'll pass for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyken.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Hyken, Chair of the Planning Board, speaking on behalf of the Planning Board and speaking more specifically about Warrant Article 23, which refers to the changes in the zoning bylaw, but of course that is parallel to Article 22, referring to the general bylaws. The Planning Board agrees that not only is this amendment consistent with the November 2017 town meeting resolution promoting gender-neutral pronouns and pronouns, it strongly supports inclusivity and the importance of acknowledging the intrinsic value of all members of our community. The Select Board further affirms that it will take appropriate action to ensure that future amendments to the zoning bylaw, as well as Planning Board reports and documents, respond to the intent of this warrant article. The Planning Board therefore voted to recommend favorable action on Article 23, subject to a review that the context of the sentence be taken into account for the most appropriate gender-neutral pronouns for that sentence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher, Sheriff Fisher.
So next Thursday's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Do I go 2 weeks?
Shira Fisher, Fischer.
We could, I mean, you're off next week? Because this late at night, everything will be done anyway, and we'll be home, but we can.
We can hear you. Just announce your name and go ahead and tell us what you wish.
So every once in a while, I'll set one. I try to keep
You muted yourself. Please hit your unmute button.
Can I pass to the next person and come back? Sorry.
I'm sorry. All right, we'll come back to you, Mr. Burstein.
Hello, I am Michael A. Burstein, a town meeting member from Precinct 12. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a co-petitioner of these warrant articles, and I thank the other co-petitioners for allowing me to join them. As many of you know, 3 years ago, I worked on changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to help create a gender-neutral term. We have seen how important it is for anyone of any gender, wherever they fall on the gender spectrum, to be accepted as a human being. Gender-neutral language is important to help people, all people, feel included. For years, people defaulted to using the male pronouns of he, him, and his, which created a society where most people would envision the standard person as being of one specific gender. Studies showed that people viewed the generic scientist or politician as male, and this influence was one of the many factors that kept non-male people from reaching for their goals. Throughout history, there have been non-binary people who do not get to be their authentic selves, and this led to depression and sometimes suicide. Today, we acknowledge that non-binary people exist and that he and she no longer includes everyone. People need to see themselves as scientists, presidents, and full members of society without bias. And it is past time we acknowledge this in the town bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. There's been a motion for the question. I'll allow it because I don't think there's much more that can be said than has already been said. I have the following people signed up to speak who will not have that opportunity if you vote in favor of this motion. Mr. Crewinghouse, Ms. Maddox, Ms. Neuenfeind, Ms. Fisher, and Ms. Frawley. This is a motion for the question, Articles 22 and 23. Apply to both articles. And the voting period is commenced. This is on the motion to terminate debate. Yes, if you wish to go home soon. No, if you want to hear more debate, such as it is, really a debate. The voting period is terminated. Jones? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Dewart? Yes. Jones, yes. Mr. Dewart has left the meeting. Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes.
What's the count?
179 yes, 31 no, 10 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 181 in favor, 31 opposed, and 10 abstentions. So the main motion under Article 22 at the top of page 22-3 is the next thing we'll be voting on. Voting period has started. Voting period terminated. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes.
Just the count, please.
214 yes, 2 no, 8 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 216 in favor, 2 opposed, and 8 abstentions. Article 23. The main motion under Article 23 is on page 23-2 over to 23-3. And that's what we'll next vote on. Requires a 2/3 vote. Voting period is terminated. Jones?
Yes.
And Ms. McNally?
McNally, yes.
The count, please.
209 yes, 1 no, 7 abstentions.
Motion carries by a vote of 211 in favor, 1 opposed, and 7 abstentions. It is now 10:21, and we have had 3 straight nights of arduous town meeting. Each of the first 2 has gone well past 10:30, and I'm not going to give you the opportunity to do that tonight. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And it's been moved. Is it seconded? All right. On the motion to adjourn, let's have, yes. The voting has commenced, and this will not be a recorded vote. Voting period, Mr. Jones. Ms. McNally.
McNally, yes.
What's the count? 17 no. 200 in favor, 17 opposed, and 3 abstentions. The motion to adjourn passes. I declare town meeting adjourned until 7 p.m. on November 30. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.